Welcome to part 4 of The Long Hot Marriage, and if you watched part 3, it did get a little hotter. I'm here with Todd Creager, who is the author of The Long Hot Marriage, and I want to ask you some more questions about the book, but other than the book, how else do you get this message about keeping the marriage alive to the general public?
Oh, a number of ways. I do a lot of teleseminars and webinars. I do live seminars. I've spoken to many large groups and associations, and I talk about it from a personal matter with marriages and relationships. And I've also talked, like I said, to businesses on how to relate and how to bring the best out of others.
Oh, okay. I didn't think the book was the only way. But I'm looking at the book here, and just this is sort of relating to the last segment that we did. And you've got this big chapter 11, and it's called Receiving in the Bedroom. And it's very interesting because we were talking about disconnect and so forth. So tell me a little bit about this hefty chapter 11.
Yeah, I think when you ask the question, I think of this couple that came to see me, and she brought the man in, she dragged him in, and she was upset with him because she caught him masturbating to some pornography, and she was really angry and really upset, and she said, "He's so selfish, he's just so selfish." And I said to her, "No, I don't think that's the problem. I think he's not selfish enough," which got her very angry at me for the moment. And I said, "Well, let me explain. I said, "Now, how many times does he come up to you and say, 'Honey, could you try this? Let's touch me this way. How about holding me this way? Could you say this? Could you whisper this in my ear?'" She goes, "No, never. That would be great if he did that." I said, "Well, that to me is selfish." Now, selfish is not self-absorbed. Now, he's self-absorbed. Now, I make a big distinction between that, being self-absorbed and being selfish. Selfish, I'm asking for what I need, adult to adult. So this is what I find is a major problem, especially with couples that come to me that one partner has low sexual desire. A lot of times the reason they have low sexual desire is because their mindset towards sex is, this is about my partner. It's not about me. I have to service my partner. And it's oftentimes the women, not always, but oftentimes it's the women. Maybe that's the way they were brought up in their head from generation to generation, that they serve, but hopefully that's changing. And we're learning that relationships, sexual relationships, are mutual and they require receiving, not just giving. And the more you receive, the more you can give. There's a relationship between the two.
Right, yeah, that's a good Christmas metaphor, actually. I mean, it's fun to open the package, too.
Right, that's right.
Is this something that we're good at in the beginning phases of a relationship, that we are more inclined to ask for what we want and it fades away? Is that what happens?
Excellent question. I think it is easier at first because, again, we've talked about this in one of our earlier segments, there's not a lot of pain in the beginning. There's not a lot of pain. But once there's pain and frustration and we start to slip into those roles, we start to protect ourselves, and that's where the problem starts. We protect ourselves, and also old patterns come up. It's sort of like when you first get to be with someone and you fall in love, it changes everything. You're kind of in this paradise, and you're in this expanded feel of yourself. So like someone who's in the zone, you're kind of in a zone. But once you fall into the regular routine of relationships, oftentimes old patterns come up and you slip into these roles. And if a person, for example, a woman may be brought up in a home where mom was giving and took everybody's needs first and her last, she might grow up to be the same way as long as she's not paying attention to that. So that's pretty much what starts to happen. People just slip into those roles that were comfortable before they fell in love.
So they just start emulating the thing that was most reinforced in their life.
Exactly.
Do you find that people, after they've been married for a while, it's like, well, he should know that I prefer roses over daisies? Do they get into it like a should kind of mentality, and that's where things start to trip up?
Have you been in my counseling sessions with me? No, this is great. No, that is true. A lot of women will put their men in a double bind, and I really challenge women to not do that because it requires asking. Men need to be asked, women too, but definitely men need to be asked. And we're not mind readers. We don't automatically tune in. I mean, if we get it right, that's great. That's gravy. But the whole idea that we're going to know exactly what women want and vice versa is a myth. We need to ask, and we need to ask often and consistently.
What are some of the other obstacles to being able to receive the lovely, wonderful gift of love that we're getting from our mate?
Well, like the book, in the book, chapter 11, the long hot marriage, it's one of my favorite chapters that I wrote. And it's because I see that this is it's like an epidemic, I see, with relationships where other issues get in the way of receiving. So there are a variety of ways where people resist pleasure. One, for example, is let's say they grew up in a household where life was about survival. There was like an alcoholic parent, let's say, and everything was upheaval. They get married. Once they get out of that out of love, wonderful paradise stage, suddenly life becomes about survival. I mean, they slip into it unconsciously. When life's about survival, you're not thinking about when your next orgasm is going to be. You're thinking about survival. So a lot of times that's an obstacle. Another obstacle is that some people are brought up to be overly independent. I think independence is great. Self-reliance is great, but let's not demean dependency. We are dependent. We depend on air and food and water, and we depend on needs. People need people. Barbara Streisand was right. People who need people. We need each other, and so we kind of play that down. When that happens, sexuality requires vulnerability to have passion, especially in the long term. Not in the short term, but in the long term. And it requires being open, and requires depending on our partner to be there, even if I'm risking and being vulnerable and sharing some part of me that I'm entrusting you with. That's not easy for a lot of people. So those are two real big things. I guess the third one that comes to mind is oftentimes people are focused on being good enough, and they're so focused on being good enough. Again, sexuality for both men and women is not, we like to pretend we have our sexual acts together, but the truth is we really don't. We have a lot to learn. So if we're so focused on being good enough, there again, we might not be open to receiving pleasure. We might not be willing to be vulnerable enough, because you might find out that I'm not so competent in this area. We overemphasize competence and underemphasize connection.
And we're talking a lot about trust, really, aren't we? We're talking about trusting that if we're open to our partner and vulnerable, that we won't get hammered, and trusting that if we reveal something, we're not going to be mocked, right?
Yes, that's right. And that's not easy to do. And you hope as a person risks, and they usually risk little at a time, that the partner comes through for them. Obviously, if they don't, then it's like a turtle is going to put their head back in the shell. So, but you don't get anywhere without that kind of risk, and you have to be open. You have to receive. And one of the things too that I just want to bring out that I see sometimes in my offices and compliments. That if a person, anyone out there could do a self-assessment. Ask yourself, are you good? Am I good at receiving compliments, or do I just say no? That's oftentimes a little clue of how well you might be receiving in other areas, sexually and otherwise. We have to actually learn how to receive compliments and take in good thoughts and good statements, and as well as love and all that good stuff.
Just be Velcro for love, right?
Velcro for love. Love that.
Well, I want to talk more about some of these issues of trust and so forth, and we're going to get into that in the next segment. So please come back and join us for part 5 of The Long Hot Marriage. And if you want to get the book, there's also a website, www.thelonghotmarriage.com. So make sure you check that out, and we'll see you in part 5.